Hello everyone and welcome back to Panik Peak. Let me know where you are listening from in the world by leaving a comment, and if you like the episode, please like and subscribe. Now, let's get cozy, and let's begin. It's always been a quiet building. The kind of place where you can hear the hum of the elevator in the distance, the clink of someone's keys echoing down the hall, but it never feels intrusive. Just background noise to the monotony of daily life. I've grown accustomed to the solitude. After all, it's just me in this high-rise apartment. No roommates, no family, just me and my thoughts. I had convinced myself that living alone was ideal, peaceful, safe, undisturbed. But as I lie awake in bed at 3 a.m., something feels off tonight. A sense of unease crawls up my spine, making the shadows in the corners of my apartment seem darker, thicker, like they're hiding something. The clock on the wall reads 3 a.m. The city outside is alive with its usual hum, but inside, everything is still, quiet. Too quiet. Then the knock comes. At first, I think I've imagined it, a soft rap at the door, barely audible. But it comes again, this time louder, insistent. I pause, my heart thudding in my chest. The knock is not one I recognize. It's late, far too late for a neighbor to be stopping by. I don't have visitors. I've lived here for months, and in all that time, I've never had someone knock at my door in the middle of the night. I slide out of bed, my feet brushing against the cool hardwood floor, and make my way to the door. My hand hovers over the handle, hesitating. I can hear my breath echo in the stillness. I reach for the peephole, careful not to make a sound. And that's when I see him. Standing there, outside my door, a man with his head tilted at an impossible angle, smiling. His expression is one of knowing, of something I can't quite place. He doesn't say a word at first. He just stands there, unnaturally still, staring. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he says, "Let me in." That's when the panic sets in. Something is wrong. Everything is wrong. But I can't turn away. I can't make myself leave. Because even though I don't know who he is, I feel like I've seen him before. And I'm not the one watching. I stagger back from the door, my breath shallow, my pulse pounding in my ears. I try to calm myself, to reason with the situation. Maybe it's just a prank, maybe someone's playing a sick joke on me, but I can't ignore the unease clawing at my chest. I take a step back, then another, my mind scrambling for an explanation. The man outside remains unmoving, his head still cocked to the side, his smile wide and unblinking. A chill sweeps over me as I slowly back away, making sure not to make a sound. I reach for my phone, trying to distract myself, but before I can unlock it, my phone buzzes. I look down, startled, seeing an incoming text from my own number. Asterisk, I saw you move. Asterisk. My heart stops. The air feels like it's been sucked out of the room, and suddenly I'm suffocating. I stare at the screen, my fingers trembling as I scroll through the messages, but there's nothing there. No previous text threads, no sign of anything that could explain this. I check the door again, my stomach flipping, but the man is still there. "Let me in," he whispers again, his voice softer now, almost coaxing, like a lullaby meant to draw me in. But I can't move. I can't breathe. I shouldn't open that door. Not to him. I back away further, stumbling slightly as my phone vibrates again. The screen flashes with another message from my number, asterisk, I'm right behind you. Asterisk. I freeze. My heart stops in my chest. I can feel it. I can feel something shifting in the air. Something behind me, something watching. The hairs on my neck stand on end, and I slowly turn around, every muscle in my body tensed, ready to run. But there's nothing. The apartment is empty. I'm alone. I turn back to the door, my breath coming in short, desperate gasps, but the knocking has stopped. The eerie silence presses in from all sides, as if the world itself has held its breath. I can't stay here. My body knows it, but my mind is frozen, paralyzed by the unease crawling up my spine. I glance back at my phone, my fingers shaking as I hold it. Asterisk, I'm behind you. Asterisk, the words flicker on the screen like a cruel joke, but I didn't type them. They just appear, unbidden, from my own number. I don't know what to do. I should call the police, I think. I should scream for help. But I don't know what good it will do. This man, whoever he is, has found me. Found my number. How? How does he know where I am? How does he know everything? I back up slowly, unsure of what I'm doing anymore. Every instinct in me screams to leave, to get out, but I don't even know where to go. The apartment is high up in the building, the hallways are empty, and no one will hear me scream. Then, I hear it. The soft scrape of something dragging across the floor, slow, deliberate, like claws against wood. I freeze, my eyes wide, my hands clammy against the walls as I try to pinpoint the sound. It comes from the door, from the other side, scraping against the wood in a rhythm that matches the pounding of my heart. I step forward, slowly, cautiously, as if testing the air. I feel my breath catch in my throat as I lift my hand to the door handle. The air around me is thick, and the walls feel like they're closing in. Don't open the door. I can hear my own thoughts screaming at me. But I'm drawn to it. Drawn to that knock, that whisper, the man's smile that seems to promise something I can't quite comprehend. I glance down at my phone again. Asterisk, open the door. Asterisk. I jump, the words sharp and cold, like an order I can't ignore. My hand trembles as I stare at the screen, but before I can respond, I hear something that stops me cold, the sound of the door handle turning. Slowly. I can't breathe. It's happening. The lock clicks, and the door creaks open, just a fraction of an inch. I don't know how. I didn't do it. I wasn't ready. Then, the whisper again, asterisk, let me in. Asterisk. I don't know if I can stop it. I don't know if I want to. The man is standing there, his head tilted even further to the side now, like he's peering into my soul. His eyes are wide, but there's nothing in them. No light. No depth. Just emptiness. And he's stepping closer. I want to scream. I want to run. But my body refuses to move. He's right there, just inches away from me, his breath cold and sharp against my skin. The door swings open fully. And everything goes dark. I don't know how long I've been standing there, paralyzed in place. Time seems irrelevant now. The darkness is absolute, as if the entire apartment has swallowed me whole. My mind races in frantic, disconnected thoughts, but there's no room for them, no space for logic. The air feels heavy, thick with something that isn't quite right. My body refuses to move, as if it knows something I can't yet comprehend. The man steps inside. His presence fills the room like a suffocating fog. His smile hasn't faded, and his head still tilts impossibly to the side, like it's not attached to his body in any normal way. His eyes are black holes, empty, hollow, and they lock onto mine. There's no malice in them. No emotion. Just emptiness. A vast, consuming void. I want to speak. I want to scream. But the words catch in my throat, choked by terror. My chest feels tight, as though the walls are closing in around me, suffocating me with every passing second. He doesn't say anything more. He doesn't need to. His gaze speaks volumes, and the very air around us seems to shift with his presence, as though something ancient and powerful is stirring. And then I hear it, the unmistakable sound of the door clicking shut behind him. I'm trapped. I try to move, to run, to do anything to escape, but my body won't obey. My legs are locked in place, my mind screaming at me to do something, anything. But it's too late. I've been cornered, ensnared by something I can't even begin to understand. His smile widens further, stretching impossibly wide until I'm sure his face can't contain it. The sight of it makes my stomach twist, the dread in my veins turning into something darker. He's not human. I know that now. Not in any way I can comprehend. He's something else entirely. Something that has no need for doors or walls. I want to close my eyes, to retreat into the safety of my mind, but I can't look away. I can't look away from the thing standing before me, the thing that shouldn't be here, the thing that has been waiting for me. His voice comes again, so soft, it almost sounds like it's in my mind. Asterisk, I told you I was behind you. Asterisk. And with those words, I feel it. The shift in the air. The pressure against my skin. The weight of it all. The darkness, the suffocating nothingness, presses in closer, wrapping around me like a shroud. I feel the world fading, my vision blurring as his form becomes a shadow, an outline in the black. Then, the world goes completely silent. I feel nothing. No fear. No cold. No warmth. Nothing. Just emptiness. I never answered the door. But somehow, it didn't matter. Because the door had already been opened for me. When I first moved into the house, everything seemed perfect. The walls were freshly painted, the floors gleamed, and the neighborhood was quiet, too quiet. But that was the thing I liked most about it. After a messy divorce, I was desperate for a fresh start, a new place where I could finally breathe again. The house had an old charm about it, nestled on a secluded street surrounded by thick trees. It felt like it could be mine. The first few nights were peaceful. But then, it started. Thumps. Scratches. The unmistakable sound of something moving above my ceiling, deep into the night. At first, I told myself it was just the house settling, the pipes expanding, or the wind shifting the old beams. But the sounds kept coming, night after night, growing louder, more distinct. Something wasn't right. I tried to ignore it. I even convinced myself that it was just my mind playing tricks on me after everything that had happened. But the noise only grew. And soon, I couldn't ignore it anymore. It started with small things, soft creaks above my head, the shuffle of feet dragging slowly across the floorboards. It was easy to dismiss, at first. Old houses made noises. But then the sounds became more deliberate, more calculated. They were like footsteps, pacing in the dark. Every night, just when the house was settling into its stillness, the noises would begin, slow, heavy steps moving across the attic floor, dragging something heavy behind them. At first, I thought I might be hearing things. But the longer it went on, the more real it became. My sleep began to suffer. I'd lie awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds that came from above. I tried to convince myself that it was nothing. That it was just the house, the wind, or maybe even some animal in the walls. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. I'd heard it too many times now. The scratching. The dragging. The footsteps. They didn't sound like anything that should be there. It was one particular evening when I'd had enough. It had been weeks, and the noises hadn't stopped. They'd only gotten worse. I hadn't slept properly in days, my mind unraveling as the thumps and scuffing scraped at my sanity. I finally reached my breaking point. I couldn't do it anymore. I had to see what was up there. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and walked over to the attic ladder. My hand trembled as I pulled it down. The cold air from the attic hit my face like a chill breath. The rickety steps groaned beneath my feet as I made my way up, my heart pounding, my mind racing with 1,000 thoughts, none of them good. The attic door creaked open, and I stepped inside, the beam of light cutting through the darkness. The space was vast, filled with dust-covered boxes, old furniture, and forgotten memories. It smelled musty, like something had been left untouched for years. The silence pressed in on me like a thick, suffocating blanket. But the silence was unsettling, because I knew, deep down, that whatever had been making the noise wasn't gone. I shone the flashlight across the room, scanning the shadows. Nothing. The attic was empty. My heartbeat started to slow as my breathing steadied. Maybe it had all been in my head, I thought. Maybe I was just letting my imagination get the best of me. But then, just as I turned to leave, it came again. That sound. A soft creak. Slow, deliberate. The sound of wood moving. I froze. My hand shook as I pointed the beam of light toward the corner where the noise had come from. There, tucked away in the farthest part of the attic, sat an old rocking chair. I hadn't noticed it before. The chair was positioned in the shadows, its wooden arms dark with age, its fabric torn and worn. But what caught my attention wasn't its appearance, it was the fact that it was rocking. The creak came again, louder this time, as the chair rocked back and forth, slowly, methodically. I took a step back. It wasn't possible. I had just scanned the attic, and there had been nothing there. No rocking chair. No movement. I stared at the chair, my breath quickening. The flashlight flickered once, casting strange shadows across the room, and I caught a glimpse of something, sitting in the chair. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, but it was still there. A dark figure, hunched over, still as stone. Its shape was impossible to define, a shadow wrapped in shadows. My pulse thundered in my ears as I forced myself to take a step forward. Who's there? I managed to choke out, my voice trembling. The figure didn't move, didn't respond. It just sat there, rocking, back and forth, the creaking filling the air. I turned to leave. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't be near that thing. But as I reached for the ladder, the sound came again, a loud, sharp creak, like the chair was moving faster now. I glanced back. It wasn't just rocking anymore. The figure had shifted. I could see its head now, the sickeningly unnatural tilt of its neck. It was staring at me, its eyes wide and dark, empty like holes in the void. Its mouth stretched into a grotesque grin, the edges of its lips curling inhumanly, revealing sharp teeth that seemed too long for any human. I couldn't breathe. My legs locked in place. I tried to move, but my body wouldn't obey. The figure in the chair slowly leaned forward, its head inching closer to me, as though it were about to speak. But instead of a voice, a horrible, guttural sound filled the room, a rasping, choking sound, like it was trying to breathe through something it shouldn't be able to. My stomach turned, bile rising in my throat. I staggered backward, terror consuming me, and that's when I saw it. The door to the attic had shut on its own, sealing me inside. The chair rocked faster, its creaks louder, the thing in it now moving, rising slowly. My feet moved without thinking, desperately searching for a way out, but there was no escape. The figure was standing now, towering above the chair, its arms outstretched as though it were coming for me. I backed into a wall, my breath coming in frantic gasps, but there was nowhere to hide. The flashlight flickered again, its beam dying, leaving me in total darkness. But I didn't need the light to know what was happening. I could feel its presence, its weight bearing down on me. I don't remember how long I stood there, frozen, too terrified to even scream. My mind fractured under the pressure, but somewhere in the back of my mind, I knew one thing: whatever it was, whatever that thing in the attic was, it wasn't supposed to be here. It wasn't supposed to exist. And it was coming for me. When the door finally burst open, I stumbled out, gasping for air, my hands shaking uncontrollably. The thing was still in the attic, waiting, watching, and the creak of the rocking chair continued in the silence long after I had fled. I never went back to that attic. I packed my things and moved out of the house within days. But no matter where I went, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me, something darker and colder than anything I'd ever felt before. I hear it sometimes, late at night. A soft creak. A dragging sound. I tell myself it's just my imagination. But deep down, I know better. The thing in the attic is still out there. And it knows where I am. It started as something small. A simple, almost insignificant detail that I couldn't ignore. Every night, at exactly 11:17 p.m., the light in my neighbor's apartment flickered on. I would glance over, almost automatically, through the thin gap in the blinds. It was never much, a dim glow, barely enough to make out the outlines of the furniture through the window, but it became a ritual for me. It was always the same, the light, at that exact time, like a silent signal from the other side of the wall. At first, I thought nothing of it. People have routines, right? Maybe it was nothing. But night after night, it became harder to ignore. There was something strange about it. Something unsettling. The light's consistency. The exactness with which it flickered on every evening, without fail. I didn't know my neighbor well, hardly at all, in fact. They kept to themselves, always quiet, always a bit too private. I never heard them move about, never heard their voice. Just that damn light. Eventually, my curiosity got the best of me. I had to know. What was going on over there? What was it about that light? The mystery grew too loud to silence. And so, tonight, I decided to take the step I had avoided for so long. I would knock on their door. I should have known that I would regret it. The clock on my wall blinked 11:17 p.m. as I pulled on my jacket. The usual chill of the apartment building seemed thicker tonight. Maybe it was the air, heavy, like something was pressing down on it, or maybe it was just the tension I'd been building inside myself for days, weeks even. I had to do it. I had to see what was behind that light. I stepped out of my apartment, feeling the cold of the hallway creep into my bones. The building was unusually quiet, like everyone had just decided to disappear. The hum of the fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, but there was no other sound. No echoes of footsteps, no soft conversations from inside apartments. It was just me and the pull of that light. I arrived at my neighbor's door, the one I had passed by countless times without ever thinking twice. But tonight felt different. The door, which had always been closed, was slightly ajar. A sliver of darkness peered through the gap, and for a moment, I hesitated. Was it my imagination, or was there something wrong about that? I shouldn't do this. I could just turn back, go to my apartment, and forget about it. But something inside me, wouldn't let go of the need to know. I pushed the door open. The apartment was silent. Cold. The air inside felt different, heavier, as though it had been trapped here for a long time. The faint yellow glow of the light was the only movement, casting long shadows across the room. Everything looked undisturbed. The couch, the coffee table, the TV, nothing had been touched. It was as if time had stopped. I stepped further inside, my breath catching in my throat. The stillness of the place was unnerving. No sounds of movement, no signs of life. Just that damn light, glowing eerily in the corner of the room. As I stood there, trying to make sense of it, a sense of dread crept up my spine. Something wasn't right. I felt it in my bones. The air was too still, too heavy. And then, without warning, the door slammed shut behind me. I jumped, my heart leaping into my throat. The sound echoed through the apartment, sharp and jarring. I spun around, my pulse pounding, but there was no one. The door was closed, locked. I couldn't escape. My chest tightened as the whispering began. At first, it was faint, just a barely audible murmur from somewhere in the shadows. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone sent a chill crawling up my spine. It wasn't a voice I recognized. The whispering seemed to fill the room, coming from all directions, too distant to pinpoint but too close to ignore. I took a step back, my heart racing in panic. My feet shuffled across the floor, the cold tiles biting into my skin. My eyes darted around, but there was nothing to see. Just shadows, just darkness creeping in around me. Then the words became clearer. You weren't supposed to see this. My breath caught. I turned in every direction, my eyes wild. The voice was closer now. It was coming from behind me, from the far corners of the room, from the walls. It was everywhere. My heart thudded painfully against my chest as the whisper repeated itself, over and over, growing louder, more insistent. You weren't supposed to see this. I stumbled backward, my hand outstretched, trying to find something, anything, to hold on to. But there was nothing. Just the cold, empty apartment and the oppressive weight of that light. And then, it happened. The shadows in the room seemed to move, stretching toward me, crawling along the walls like living things. They slithered across the floor, reaching for my legs. I gasped, stumbling further back, but the shadows followed, like they were attached to me, pushing me toward the center of the room. The light flickered. Once. Twice. A soft pulse, like the beat of a heart. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. The air felt suffocating, thick with something I couldn't name. The whispering grew louder, clearer, until it felt like the voice was inside my skull. You weren't supposed to see this, I turned toward the door, desperate to escape, but before I could reach it, the room shifted. The door creaked open on its own, but it didn't lead to the hallway. No. It opened into darkness, a vast, black void that stretched out endlessly. There was nothing behind that door. Just an abyss. The whispers rose to a maddening crescendo. You have to leave now. It's too late. You've seen too much, The room spun around me. The shadows seemed to close in, pressing against me, suffocating me. I reached for the door, desperate to flee, but my hand passed through it. I was falling, tumbling into the blackness, caught between this world and the one that waited just beyond the veil. The light flickered one final time, then went out. The apartment was plunged into complete darkness. I was no longer alone. And somewhere, from the blackness that now consumed everything, I heard the voice one last time. Asterisk, now you've seen too much, asterisk. And then, nothing. When I woke, it was morning. The soft light of dawn seeped in through the cracks in the blinds of my apartment, and I was lying on my couch, disoriented, drenched in sweat. The hum of the building seemed normal again, distant chatter of neighbors drifting from the floors above and below. But something had changed. I could still hear the whispers in my head, faint but insistent. It wasn't over. It never had been. I grabbed my coat and rushed to my neighbor's door. The hallway was quiet, as it always had been. But as I approached their apartment, I stopped. The door was closed. I knocked, my heart thumping loudly in my chest. No response. I knocked again, harder this time. Nothing. I pressed my ear to the door, but the silence that greeted me was absolute. No lights flickered through the blinds. No sounds of life. Just the feeling that something wasn't right. And then, as I turned to leave, I saw it. A single, flickering light, behind the blinds, in the window of my own apartment. The glow was there again, at 11:17 p.m. But this time, it was for me. It was supposed to be a weekend getaway, a break from the constant buzz of everyday life. A chance to unwind in nature, to bond with friends, to breathe fresh air and forget about everything else. We had rented a cabin deep in the woods, far from civilization, with no Wi-Fi and no distractions. Just us, the trees, and the quiet hum of the wild. We thought it would be perfect. When we arrived the night before, everything felt just right. The cabin was cozy, rustic, with the faint smell of wood and pine. We spent the evening by the fire, laughing, telling stories, and enjoying the peace of the wilderness. It was a little isolated, sure, but that's what we'd wanted. We settled in for the night, no worries, no fears. Just the sound of the wind through the trees and the occasional crackle from the fireplace. But that peace didn't last long. When I woke up the next morning, everything had changed. It started slowly, just a strange, inexplicable feeling creeping into my chest. Then, when I opened my eyes and looked outside, it hit me. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The cabin wasn't where it was supposed to be. At first, I thought I was still half asleep, that my eyes hadn't fully adjusted. I rubbed them and blinked hard, but no, the view outside the window was completely different. The familiar stretch of open grass, the clearing where the cabin had been, was gone. Instead, dense trees, towering and dark, surrounded the cabin. I pressed my face against the cold glass, trying to make sense of it. I looked left, right, and straight ahead. Nothing. The cabin was completely encased in the woods now, as if it had been swallowed by the trees overnight. A cold shiver ran down my spine, and my heart began to race. I quickly pulled back from the window and glanced around the room. I had to be dreaming. This couldn't be real. But as my feet hit the floor and I stumbled toward the door, my head spun with confusion. I could still hear the sound of my friends stirring upstairs, unaware of the strangeness that had already begun. "Guys, something's wrong," I called as I ran out of the room. The others started to stir as I bolted down the stairs, but they were still groggy, barely awake. They thought I was just being paranoid. When I reached the front door, I threw it open, ready to step outside and confirm that this was all some sort of strange misunderstanding. But when I did, the cold hit me like a wall. The air was thick with fog, swirling around the trees, making everything look like it was being swallowed whole. The open clearing where we had parked last night. Gone. All that was left were thick clusters of trees, twisting branches, and an overwhelming silence that gripped the air. "Hey, what's going on?" I called out again, my voice trembling now. But no one replied. I turned around, panic rising in my throat. My friends were still inside, moving slowly, rubbing their eyes, unaware of the shift in reality. I needed to find out what had happened. I needed answers. I ran toward the edge of the cabin, hoping to spot the familiar trail that had led us here, the path we'd walked last night. But there was nothing. The trees seemed to grow closer, as if they had moved in, hiding the cabin in their shadow. It felt like I was trapped, suffocating in a place that didn't exist. I checked my phone, no bars. No Wi-Fi. It was like the world had vanished. "Guys! Come on!" I shouted. My voice sounded thin, weak against the weight of the wilderness that pressed down on me. I heard someone from inside, calling my name. It was Anna, one of my friends. She had finally come downstairs, looking confused. "What's going on?" she asked, stepping into the doorway. Her voice cracked as she looked around, taking in the unfamiliar, claustrophobic scene. I couldn't even explain it. The cabins. It's not where it was last night. I don't know how. It's just gone. Anna's eyes darted nervously to the woods. "You're freaking out," she said, trying to offer me some comfort, but I could see the doubt on her face. She didn't believe me. Not yet. "I'm not," my words faltered. "Look, there's something wrong. The trees, they moved. It's like the whole world shifted overnight." We both stood there for a few seconds, the only sound now the low rustle of leaves. Then, suddenly, something caught my eye. Beneath the old wooden floorboards by the fireplace, there was a small gleam of something I hadn't seen the night before. I didn't know why, but the feeling that pulled me toward it was irresistible, like a voice whispering to me from the dark. "I'm going to check this out," I told Anna, and without waiting for a response, I moved toward the corner of the room where the floorboards met the wall. My hands trembled as I pried up the boards, the nails screeching in protest. Finally, they loosened, and beneath the floor, there was an old, weathered journal, its pages curled and yellowed with age. My fingers grazed the rough leather binding as I pulled it out. Something about it felt wrong. This wasn't just an old book, it was a warning. I opened it, flipping through the pages quickly, all written in the same hurried, frenzied script. It was all rambling, talk of isolation, of the forest, of things that moved in the dark, but the last page, the final words, made my blood run cold. "Don't let them see you." The ink was smudged, as if the person had been writing in a rush, no, in fear. I heard something behind me, a soft rustling sound. My body froze. I turned, my breath caught in my throat. There, just outside the cabin door, I saw it, a figure. No, it wasn't a person. It couldn't be. It was a shape, dark and indistinct, shifting among the trees. I couldn't make out any features, just a vague form, and it was staring directly at me. Watching. I backed away, panic flooding my chest. The figure didn't move, but I could feel its eyes on me, an intense, unblinking gaze that seemed to pierce through the cabin walls. It was waiting, I realized. Waiting for me to make the next move. Waiting for us all. "Anna," I whispered, barely able to get the words out. "Get away from the door. It's here." She turned toward me, her eyes wide, her mouth open to speak, but before she could, a low, eerie sound echoed from the trees, a hollow, moaning wind, or something else. Something worse. I didn't wait to find out. I grabbed the journal and bolted for the back of the cabin, not looking back, not daring to see if the figure was still there. My mind raced with the words from the journal. Don't let them see you. I had no idea what we had stumbled into. All I knew was that whatever it was out there. Watching. And it wasn't going to let us leave. We spent the rest of the day in a frantic haze, trying to find any trace of the outside world, trying to reach anyone. But no matter where we went in the woods, the trees only seemed to grow thicker, the path to escape always just out of reach. Our phones stayed dead, and the sky, though clear, seemed unnaturally dim, casting everything in an oppressive, muted light. As nightfall approached, the air grew colder, and the cabin, which had once felt like a cozy refuge, now felt like a tomb. We huddled together, the heavy silence pressing in on us, broken only by the occasional creak of the cabin's old frame or the eerie whispers carried on the wind. The figure I'd seen earlier never reappeared, but I knew it was still out there, waiting for us to make a mistake, to give ourselves away. Anna, Mark, and the others began to get restless. Their nerves, already frayed by the strange events, were on the edge. They couldn't understand what was happening, couldn't grasp the terror that had seized me since I found the journal. Maybe we're just overreacting, Mark said, trying to laugh it off, but there was a tremor in his voice that betrayed his words. We're probably just lost. But I knew better. We weren't lost. We were being hunted. By the time the moon rose high in the sky, I was certain that something had changed within the forest. The woods felt alive, pulsing with something ancient, something dark. I had seen the shadows between the trees shift, almost as if they were moving of their own volition. The woods were alive with eyes, watching, waiting. We were the prey. In a desperate attempt to escape, we decided to break into smaller groups, thinking maybe we could find a way out if we split up. But the moment we moved, I heard it again, the same low, moaning wind, only now it wasn't just a sound. It was a voice, or something mimicking a voice, faint and distant, but unmistakably real. We need to stay together, I shouted, my voice barely breaking through the growing storm of panic in my chest. We quickly regrouped, but it was too late. The floor beneath our feet began to tremble, a low, rumbling sound shaking the very foundation of the cabin. The walls creaked as though something massive was moving just beneath the ground. I grabbed the journal again, hoping for some clue, some way to stop this, but there was nothing more to read. The last pages had already been torn away. And then, as the shaking intensified, we heard it. Footsteps. Heavy, slow, deliberate. They were coming from inside the walls, crawling beneath the floorboards, growing closer with each passing second. Our eyes locked in terror as we all realized what was happening. The forest wasn't just watching. It was closing in. In a last-ditch effort to survive, I grabbed Anna's arm and pulled her toward the door. We had to leave. We had to get out. But as we opened it, the woods outside weren't the same anymore. The trees, which had once been distant, now pressed against the cabin, blocking any chance of escape. There was no way out. The footsteps inside the cabin grew louder, and I could hear the soft, whispering voices now too. They were all around us. From the trees. From the walls. In the air itself. The shadows took shape, twisting into figures, dark, distorted versions of humans, their faces half-formed, their bodies blurry and ethereal, yet undeniably present. They've seen us, I whispered, barely able to choke the words out. Anna screamed, and that was when I realized, there was no running. There was no escaping whatever this place had become. We weren't just lost in the woods. We were lost in something else, something ancient, something that had never intended to let us leave. As the figures closed in, I understood the journal's warning. Don't let them see you. But it was too late. They had already seen us. The last thing I remember was the feeling of being pulled into the darkness, the cold grip of the woods claiming me. The last thing I saw before everything went black were the faces, twisted, silent, and hungry, surrounding us, their eyes burning with an insatiable hunger. And then, nothing. Days later, the cabin stood silent in the woods, just as it had before. But no one came. No one saw the signs, the scratches in the wood, the pages of the journal scattered in the dust. No one heard the echoes of the lost. And the woods, they waited. They always wait. I never thought much of the strange noises. Living on this secluded farm, miles away from town, it's easy to dismiss the oddities of rural life. The creaks of the old house settling, the rustling of the trees in the wind, the occasional animal scurrying by, it was all part of the isolation. But for the past few months, something's been different. Every evening, as the sky darkens and the stars begin to blink into view, I hear soft, deliberate footsteps outside my window. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. The wind, maybe, or the sound of branches brushing against the house. But it wasn't. The footsteps always come at the same time, and when I peek out the window, there's no one there. The yard, the fields, the woods beyond, are all empty. I tell myself it's nothing to worry about. Just a deer, perhaps. Or some other animal that happens to wander close. But the nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach won't go away. It never does. Tonight, something feels different. The silence is thicker than usual. The moon is hidden behind a blanket of clouds, leaving the night even darker. I can feel it, like a weight pressing down on me. The footsteps have stopped, but the unease lingers. I should stay inside. I should ignore it, tell myself I'm being paranoid. But that gnawing feeling grows stronger, and before I can stop myself, I find my boots in hand, stepping out into the cold night air. This time, I'll find out what's out there. I have to. The air is still, unnervingly so. I step off the porch and into the night, my boots crunching against the dry grass. A sliver of moonlight cuts through the clouds, illuminating the field ahead in a soft, ghostly glow. The barn sits in the distance, its silhouette barely visible through the haze. The farm is completely still, but I feel the weight of something watching me. A presence. I keep moving, my heart pounding louder with each step, but I can't shake the feeling that I'm being followed. I stop, forcing myself to listen. There's nothing. The silence presses against my ears, thick and suffocating. I try to steady my breath, but my pulse is erratic, quickening with every passing second. The footsteps. They've stopped, but the sense of being watched hasn't. It only grows stronger. I reach the edge of the woods. The trees loom dark and silent before me, their branches twisted into eerie shapes by the wind. My flashlight cuts through the darkness, its beam flickering unsteadily. I step off the edge of the field and into the dense underbrush, pushing my way through the low-hanging branches and tangled vines. The cold stings at my skin, and I pull my jacket tighter around me, but the chill doesn't seem to come from the air. It feels closer. The footsteps, no longer distant, are right behind me now. My breath catches in my throat. I turn quickly, but there's no one there. Just the thick darkness of the woods, stretching endlessly into the unknown. I'm not alone, though. I can feel it. Something is just out of sight, lurking in the shadows, waiting for me to make the first move. I try to move forward, but my feet feel heavy. It's as though the earth is pulling me deeper into the woods with every step. My legs ache, my hands trembling from the cold and the overwhelming sense of dread settling over me like a thick, suffocating blanket. Suddenly, I see it. A figure, standing just beyond the reach of my flashlight's beam. It's tall, far too tall to be a person, and the way it stands, motionless, almost statuesque, sends a jolt of fear through my body. I freeze, my heart hammering in my chest. The figure doesn't move, doesn't even acknowledge my presence. It simply stands there, waiting. Then, as though sensing my gaze, it turns. The movement is slow, deliberate. My breath catches in my throat as I lock eyes with it. And that's when I see them. Its eyes. Black. Completely black. No whites, no pupils, just two endless voids staring back at me. It's as though I'm looking into an abyss, and I can feel myself being pulled into it, unable to look away. I try to speak, to scream, but my throat is dry. No sound comes out. I can't move, can't even breathe. My body feels frozen in place, my limbs heavy with terror. And then I realize I'm not alone. Not just with this one figure. Another one steps from the shadows, and then another, until they form a circle around me. All of them are the same. Tall, thin, with those same black eyes, watching me. Their faces are featureless, almost humanoid, but the eyes, those eyes are enough to drive me mad. I back away, slowly, trying to hold on to whatever shred of sanity I have left, but the air around me feels thicker, colder. The trees seem to bend inward, as though closing in, trapping me. The figures don't move. They just watch. I hear a rustle behind me. I turn quickly, panic surging through me, and that's when I see it. A figure, cloaked in shadows, walking slowly toward me, its feet making no sound on the forest floor. It stops just inches from me, and I can see its face now. Its eyes. Black. Empty. It reaches out, a long, cold hand, toward my face. I don't know what it wants. I don't know what they all want. But as its fingers brush my cheek, I feel something wrong, like the weight of their gaze is seeping into me, twisting my mind. I try to break free, but it's no use. The more I struggle, the more the figures close in, surrounding me, their eyes drilling into me with a hunger that sends waves of terror crashing through me. I can't escape. They won't let me. And then, in the distance, I hear it again. The soft, deliberate footsteps. But they're not coming from outside the house. They're coming from behind me, from within the circle of figures. The darkness has swallowed me whole, and I realize, it has always been here, waiting, I woke up to the sound of my own breath. Deep, ragged gasps, like I had been running for hours. But when I opened my eyes, there was only the faint glow of the early morning sun creeping through the curtains of my bedroom window. For a moment, I thought it had been a dream, a nightmare so vivid I could still feel the weight of their eyes, the cold touch on my skin. I rushed to the window, pulling the curtain back, but the yard was empty. Nothing. No shadowy figures lurking in the trees. No black eyes staring at me. But as I turned back toward my bed, my eyes fell on the floor. And there, just barely visible under the bed, was a single, deep footprint. The shape of something heavy, something wrong, pressed into the dust. The chill runs through me again. It hasn't ended. They're still here. They never left. The footsteps, they'll be back tonight. For as long as I could remember, there was always a strange unease that clung to the basement of our house. It wasn't the kind of place you'd willingly venture into, especially not alone. The house had been in the family for generations, and though it was mostly well kept, there was something about that small, dark space beneath the stairs that gave me the chills every time I even thought about it. The basement was a place I had learned to ignore, until tonight. I had always heard noises coming from below, faint creaks and whispers that echoed up through the floorboards, but I'd convinced myself it was just the house settling, the wind, or my overactive imagination. Tonight, though, was different. The sounds were louder, more distinct, something was definitely moving down there. A whisper in the night, a scraping sound, something, or someone, stirring in the depths of the house. Against my better judgment, I decided it was finally time to confront it. I grabbed the old flashlight I kept in the drawer by the front door and headed toward the basement stairs. My hand trembled slightly as I gripped the railing. The house felt too quiet now, the air too thick, as if it were holding its breath. The cold from below crept up the stairs, reaching for me, pulling me toward the darkened entryway. The light flickered when I tried to turn it on. I frowned, giving the flashlight a shake, but it continued to sputter weakly. The basement door loomed ahead, barely visible in the dimness, but I wasn't about to go down there without some light. I took a deep breath and pushed the door open. The first step down felt like it sent a shock of ice through my body. I stifled a shiver, trying to steady myself. The stairs groaned beneath my weight, as though protesting every movement. With each step I took, the air grew colder, and the familiar smells of earth and dampness hit me like a slap to the face. I kept my eyes fixed on the beam of light ahead, trying not to let my thoughts wander. By the time I reached the bottom, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely keep a grip on the flashlight. I scanned the room quickly, my breath heavy in the still air. The shadows here were thick, clinging to the corners like something living, watching. There were old boxes stacked in a corner, forgotten furniture covered with dusty sheets. But in the farthest corner, I saw it. An old mirror. It wasn't large, but it stood out, reflecting the faint light of the flashlight in a way that made my stomach drop. The frame was once ornate, deep, dark wood intricately carved, but it was now chipped and decayed, the details dulled by time. What really caught my attention, though, was the crack running down the center of the glass. It was jagged and irregular, as if something had struck it violently, but somehow, it was still intact. There was a strange aura about it, something unsettling about its very presence. I tried to shake off the feeling, but my legs refused to move. My feet felt like they were glued to the floor as I stared at the mirror. There was no rational explanation for the discomfort creeping up my spine, but it was there, gnawing at me. I stepped closer, drawn inexplicably toward it. My breath came in shallow, nervous gasps. The flashlight flickered again, and for a moment, the basement was pitch black. A sharp chill ran through me, and I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. When the light returned, it fell directly on the mirror. I reached out to touch it. The moment my fingers brushed against the cold glass, the sensation was immediate. A cold so deep it wasn't just the temperature, it felt as if the mirror itself was alive, pulling me in. My fingers pressed harder, almost involuntarily, against the smooth surface, and then, I froze. I had seen my reflection in the glass, of course, but the moment I laid my hand on it, my reflection didn't move with me. The eyes staring back at me were wide, too wide, and hollow. The figure in the mirror wasn't me anymore. Someone else stood there. I pulled my hand back, my heart racing. But the figure in the mirror didn't react to my movement, it remained still, staring directly at me. It was a man, tall, with dark, messy hair and a gaunt face, a strange smile curling at the edges of his lips. His eyes were unnaturally large, black, and unblinking. I gasped, my breath catching in my throat. My head spun, confusion and fear clouding my thoughts. I turned around quickly. Nothing. The basement was empty. I looked back at the mirror. The man was closer now, his smile wider, his face more distinct, more alive. The reflection seemed to stretch forward, reaching out of the glass, yet the basement around me was still unchanged. He took a slow step forward in the mirror. I blinked and took a step back, my heart pounding violently against my ribs. This couldn't be happening. This was impossible. I had to be seeing things. But I wasn't. The figure in the mirror was moving, slowly inching closer. His eyes were fixed on me, glowing with something that made my stomach lurch. I stepped back again, my mind racing, but it felt like the mirror was pulling me in. I couldn't look away. A voice, low and cold, like ice scraping against stone, whispered from the depths of the mirror, "You shouldn't have come." I froze. It didn't matter how hard I tried to tear my gaze away. My feet were rooted to the spot. I couldn't leave. The figure's smile widened, impossibly wide. His fingers twitched, and then, just as suddenly, he reached out, pressing his hand flat against the glass, inches from where mine had been. My pulse quickened, and I spun around, desperate to escape. The stairs were right behind me, but I couldn't find the strength to move. A creeping dread wrapped itself around my throat, squeezing the air from my lungs. A soft rustling behind me caught my attention. The footsteps. The footsteps from the darkness. I turned around too quickly, nearly losing my balance. The basement was still empty, except for the mirror. But I could hear them. I could hear someone walking, slow and deliberate. Coming closer. I tried to scream, but the sound stuck in my throat, thick and heavy. And then, I heard the whisper again, this time directly behind me, breath on my ear. "Don't run. It won't help." I spun around in a panic, but there was nothing there. No one. Only the mirror. The figure was closer now. In the reflection, his face was only inches from mine, his black eyes wide, filled with something I couldn't name, hunger, malice, but something far worse. He didn't need to speak anymore. I could see it in his grin. He reached out. This time, I didn't hesitate. I bolted for the stairs, each step slipping beneath me as if the floor were trying to pull me down. My breath was ragged as I scrambled up, the air thick with dread. I nearly tripped twice before reaching the door. But the moment I slammed it shut behind me, I felt it. A pressure. A weight, as if something was pushing against the door, trying to get in. I backed away slowly, panting, my body trembling. I didn't dare turn around. But the mirror in the hallway reflected me, still, and I saw the figure standing behind me, his smile wide and knowing, eyes gleaming dark with malevolence. And then, I heard him speak again. Asterisk, "It's too late now." Asterisk. I felt the truth of his words creep into every corner of my mind. I stood frozen, my heart hammering in my chest. The house around me seemed to pulse with a heavy, unnatural energy, the air thick and oppressive. The reflection of the figure in the mirror, my reflection, distorted by the glass, didn't move. It just smiled, its eyes glistening with something far darker than I could comprehend. And then, slowly, I realized what was happening. The figure wasn't in the mirror anymore. It was with me. It had been all along. The chill in the room deepened, and I could feel its presence behind me, creeping closer. I wasn't alone. It was standing right there. I dared not look, but every fiber of my being screamed to run. I took a trembling step back toward the door. The footsteps in the basement were still there, soft but steady, echoing with an ominous rhythm. With each step I took toward the door, I could hear them getting closer. The floorboards creaked underfoot as if someone, was right behind me. I turned the handle, but the door wouldn't budge. I pushed harder, panic rising in my throat. No, the door wouldn't open. I whipped around, and for the briefest moment, I thought I saw the figure move, just a flicker of motion in the corner of my eye. My breath caught in my throat, and I stumbled back, desperate to escape, my mind racing for any way out. The air felt heavy, the temperature plummeting even further, and I realized, it was too late. The figure was not just in the mirror anymore, it was inside me, inside the house. I could feel it, its dark, malignant energy flooding the rooms, creeping into my skin, wrapping around my bones. A voice echoed from the shadows, close enough to feel the chill on my skin. Asterisk, it's time. Asterisk. And then I heard something I hadn't expected, laughter. Soft, slow, almost comforting in its malevolent rhythm. I didn't need to look back to know the smile had never left the reflection. It was real. It was with me now. I couldn't escape it. The last thing I saw before everything went dark was the glass of the mirror, cracked and broken, as if the reflection had shattered and pulled the world into itself. I didn't scream. There was no need. I was already gone. I had always felt safe in my apartment. It was small, cozy, just the kind of place where I could curl up on the couch after a long day, enjoy the quiet, and forget about the world. The walls were thick, the floor creaky in all the right ways, and at night, the only sounds I ever really heard were the hum of the fridge and the occasional wind rattling the windows. That night, though, something felt different. It wasn't the storm outside, though it was vicious, battering the glass and shaking the old trees near the building. It wasn't even the silence, which seemed to hang in the air too thickly. No, what made the night feel off-kilter was the unsettling, almost imperceptible feeling that I wasn't entirely alone. I tried to brush it off. I was always a bit of a worrywart, overthinking every creak of the floorboards or flicker of the light. But as I sank deeper into the couch cushions, I couldn't shake the nagging sense that there was someone, watching me from the other room. And then, I heard it. At first, it was nothing more than a soft shuffle, almost like the wind had caught something, a piece of paper, maybe, or a curtain brushing against the floor. I wasn't concerned. The apartment was old, it had its quirks. But as I lay there, listening, the sound didn't stop. It continued, slow and deliberate, like something dragging itself across the floor. My eyes shot open. I listened more closely. It was faint, but unmistakable, a dragging sound, like something heavy scraping against the floor. My stomach churned. I swallowed hard, convincing myself it was just the storm playing tricks on me. Maybe it was the radiator acting up, or the neighbors above me, dropping something. Hello. I called out, my voice a little unsteady. The noise stopped. I held my breath. My gaze flicked nervously to the door leading into the next room. Nothing moved. No creaks. No wind. I let out a shaky sigh, half relieved, half disappointed. It's fine, I muttered to myself. Nothing's there. But then, the noise came again. This time, it was louder, closer. The dragging sound was unmistakable, like fingers, or nails, scraping across the wooden floor. It sent a bolt of ice straight through my veins. My heart pounded in my chest as my eyes darted toward the hallway. I stood up, carefully, slowly, trying not to make a sound. The apartment seemed eerily still, like the entire place was holding its breath. I reached for my phone on the coffee table, my hands trembling as I tried to maintain some semblance of control. If anything, I should call someone, but who? My friends would laugh it off. The neighbors? They'd think I was crazy. But I couldn't ignore it. There was something wrong. Is someone there? I called out, louder this time. My voice wavered, cracking slightly as if I didn't truly believe the words. The noise stopped again. A cold sweat broke out on my forehead. I didn't dare move for a moment, listening intently for any sound. I tried to convince myself it was just the house settling. Just the wind. I turned my phone in my hand, my finger hovering over the number for emergency services, just in case. And then I heard it, the scraping noise returned, but this time it was different. It was closer. Closer than before. My breath hitched as my body froze. I didn't dare take another step, but I couldn't look away from the hallway. Every muscle in my body screamed for me to move, to run, but I was rooted to the spot. The shuffling noise was moving now, dragging itself in a slow, methodical rhythm that grew louder with every passing second. My mind raced as I tried to think of any logical explanation. A rat? A neighbor with some odd habit? But none of it made sense. None of it felt right. I had to look. Against every instinct screaming in my head, I forced my feet to carry me toward the hallway. My legs felt like they were made of lead as I moved toward the doorway that separated the living room from the dark, silent space beyond. The air seemed to thicken the closer I got, and the silence pressed down on me like a weight. I turned the corner, cautiously, my eyes straining to make out anything in the shadows. The lights in the other room were off, casting it into an impenetrable darkness. But then, just beyond the threshold of the doorway, I saw it. A figure. A shape. Standing completely still in the dark. I froze, my heart hammering in my chest, my throat tight with fear. The figure didn't move. Not a twitch. It was as if it was waiting for me, watching, observing. The room felt colder, and I suddenly realized that I was holding my breath. I opened my mouth to speak, to demand an answer, but the words died in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Then, through the suffocating silence, I heard it. A whisper. Barely audible, but unmistakable. It came from the figure in the dark. Asterisk, I know you're there, asterisk. A shiver ran down my spine as the whisper seemed to slither its way into my mind. It was cold, unnatural, like the voice didn't belong to anything human. My pulse raced, and my mind screamed at me to run, to turn and bolt, but I couldn't. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the figure. It stood motionless, as if waiting for me to make a move. And then it did. The figure took a slow, deliberate step forward. The dragging noise came again, louder this time, like something heavy was scraping against the floor. The sound made my stomach lurch. I didn't know what to do. Part of me wanted to scream, to fight, but I was paralyzed, rooted to the spot. My heart raced in my chest, threatening to burst. It took another step. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. Suddenly, there was another sound. A door creaked open behind me, the unmistakable groan of wood on wood. I whipped around, my heart leaping into my throat, but there was nothing. Just the door to my bedroom, slowly swinging open as if it had a mind of its own. I spun back around to the figure in the dark, but it was gone. Just gone. The only sound left was the soft scrape of something moving across the floor. And then, in the dark, the whisper came again, this time directly in my ear. asterisk you shouldn't have looked, asterisk. I spun around, my heart racing as I searched the room, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The figure was gone, vanished into the oppressive darkness, but the air still felt heavy, suffocating. I wasn't alone. I knew I wasn't. The scraping sound persisted, slow and agonizing, like nails being dragged across wood, but it was no longer in the other room. It was right behind me. I turned again, my eyes wide with terror, expecting, no, dreading, to see something emerge from the shadows. But nothing. Just the creaking old apartment, as if it were mocking me. The door to my bedroom stood open wide now, swinging slightly as though someone, or something, had entered. I took a step toward it, my body trembling with each inch I moved, my mind screaming for me to turn around, to leave, to escape. But my feet wouldn't obey. And then, from the darkness of the bedroom, a sound. A low, guttural noise, not quite a whisper, not quite a growl. My blood ran cold, and I froze, paralyzed by fear. I knew that sound. I should have never looked. I should have never called out. The air around me thickened, heavier than before, as if the very walls of the apartment were closing in. The weight of unseen eyes pressed down on me, suffocating me with their presence. My body was moving against my will, my legs carrying me toward the bedroom door as if some force was guiding me, pulling me deeper into the darkness. I reached the doorway, and it felt like time had stopped. I could feel the figure in the dark, just behind me, its breath cold against my neck, its presence everywhere. I stepped inside, my hands shaking as I fumbled for the light switch. But when I flicked it, the bulb flickered once, and then nothing. The room was dark. I turned back, hoping to escape, but the door behind me slammed shut with a force that rattled the windows. I pounded on it, desperate to get out, but the handle wouldn't budge. A laugh, low and sinister, echoed through the apartment. I felt it in my bones, a sound so unnatural it could only have come from something beyond this world. It was right there, behind me, just out of sight. Then the whisper came again, but this time, it wasn't a warning. Asterisk you're mine now, asterisk. And with that, the room went completely silent. I'm still here. I don't know how much time has passed. The darkness seems endless, and no matter how many times I scream, no one answers. It's as if I've become part of the apartment now, a whisper in the shadows, a forgotten presence lost to time. The scraping noise is still here. It never stops. And the figure? It watches me. It always watches. It was supposed to be a simple drive. A quick trip through the quiet countryside, just me and the open road. The kind of solitude I craved, away from the noise of the city. But the night, with its cold, suffocating stillness, had other plans. The highway stretched ahead like a ribbon of blackness, cutting through the endless expanse of wilderness. The clock on the dashboard blinked 2:37 a.m. when it happened, the sudden sputter of the engine, followed by the jarring silence that filled the car. I cursed under my breath, trying the ignition again, but it was no use. The car was dead. I didn't panic immediately. I'd been in worse situations. No big deal, I thought. I'd get out, check the engine, maybe give it a quick look under the hood. It wasn't the first time my car had acted up. But as I stepped out into the night, a sense of unease crept over me, like a whisper on the wind. The road ahead was empty. No cars. No lights. Nothing but the heavy dark pressing in from all sides. It should have been peaceful. But something felt wrong. Very wrong. I reached under the hood, fiddling with wires I didn't really know how to fix, when the air around me seemed to grow stiller. Even the wind, which had been rustling through the trees earlier, stopped. My throat tightened. I glanced over my shoulder instinctively. That's when I heard it. A faint sound, barely audible at first. Like the rhythmic tapping of footsteps on gravel. It was coming from behind me, from the road that stretched out into nothingness. My eyes darted toward the horizon, but I saw nothing, just the endless black void of night. I froze, the sound growing a little louder with each passing second. It was unmistakable now. Someone, or something, was walking toward me. Panic crawled up my spine, but I told myself it was nothing. Maybe someone else had pulled over to check on me. Maybe it was just a passerby. There was a logic to it, I reasoned. But as the footsteps continued, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Deeply wrong. I quickly slammed the hood of the car shut and made my way back toward the driver's side, moving faster now. My heart hammered in my chest, my breath coming faster as I slid back into the seat, slamming the door and locking it. I told myself it was fine. I just needed to wait. Maybe someone was coming to help. The footsteps were closer now, too close. Thud, thud, thud. I looked through the rearview mirror, but the road was still empty. No one. No car. No sign of movement. Just the same, empty stretch of highway. Then it came again. A tap on the window. I froze, my heart lurching in my chest. The tap was soft, almost hesitant. But unmistakable. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't my imagination. I slowly turned my head toward the window. And there she was. A woman. Her face pressed against the glass, eyes hollow, staring directly at me. Her lips stretched into a wide, twisted smile that was too large for her face, her teeth sharp and unnaturally white in the moonlight. I gasped, my chest tightening as I tried to move, to speak, to do something, but I was paralyzed. Her eyes didn't blink. She didn't look away. Her smile grew wider, impossibly wide, and I could see that there was something wrong with her skin, pale, almost translucent, stretched too tight over her bones. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drive. I wanted to escape. But I couldn't move. She whispered, her voice an eerie, low hum that sent a chill running through my bones. Don't drive away. I could barely breathe, let alone answer. I was locked in place, staring at this thing. This woman who shouldn't have been there, who shouldn't have been able to press her face to the glass like that, her breath fogging it up in unnatural patterns. I couldn't look away, even though every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. To get out of there. She tilted her head slightly, as if studying me. Don't drive away, she repeated, her smile widening even more. Her voice was almost soothing. Soft, coaxing, like a lullaby. It almost made me want to stay. To hear her out. But something deep inside screamed that if I listened to her, if I stayed, I'd never leave this road. I'd be trapped. With shaking hands, I reached for the ignition, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The keys fumbled between my fingers, but I didn't care. I had to start the car. The woman's face didn't move. She stayed pressed against the window, her hollow eyes never leaving mine. She didn't say anything else, but I could hear the soft, rhythmic thud of her footsteps as she slowly, deliberately moved along the side of the car. Finally, I twisted the key, praying for the engine to start. The car sputtered. Nothing. I cursed under my breath and tried again. This time, it roared to life, the engine vibrating beneath me. The sudden noise made me jump, but I didn't hesitate. My foot slammed on the gas. The tires screeched as I peeled away from the shoulder, my heart hammering in my chest. But just as I was about to breathe a sigh of relief, I glanced in the rearview mirror. She was there. Running. Fast. Too fast. Her pale form barely visible in the dark, but I could see her, a shadow, a blur, chasing after the car with terrifying speed. Her head tilted to one side, that same, wide, twisted grin still stretched across her face. I floored the gas pedal, my hands gripping the wheel as the headlights carved a narrow path through the road ahead, my eyes darting back to the mirror. But as I pushed the car faster, I swear I could hear her footsteps again, behind me. Closer now. Thud, thud, thud. And then, as if the very darkness itself had swallowed her up, the footsteps stopped. I didn't dare stop. I didn't dare slow down. I just kept driving, the engine roaring beneath me, my knuckles white on the wheel. And even though I couldn't see her anymore, even though the road ahead seemed to open up into an endless stretch of emptiness, I could still feel her watching me. Still hear the echo of her voice. Don't drive away. And deep down, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. I didn't stop. Not even when my eyes blurred with exhaustion. Not when the darkness seemed to stretch on forever, and the road ahead felt endless. I drove faster, my foot glued to the accelerator, the engine whining in protest as I tried to escape the sensation of her presence, lingering like a shadow in my mind. But as the miles ticked by, something changed. The road, which had once been empty and barren, began to look familiar. Too familiar. The same curve in the road, the same broken signpost. The same stretch of empty, desolate highway. I shook my head, trying to clear the fog of fatigue. No, I whispered to myself. This can't be happening. But it was. The road hadn't changed. I hadn't gone anywhere. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screeching as the car jolted to a stop. My heart was pounding, my breath shallow and rapid, panic rising in my throat. I looked around, desperate for some sign of life, something that would break the oppressive silence of the night. There was nothing. And then, from the corner of my eye, I saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the road, just outside the reach of the headlights. Her silhouette was a shadow, pale against the dark. I didn't need to look twice. I knew it was her. The woman. She was standing perfectly still, her head tilted to one side, that same twisted smile spread across her face. Her eyes, hollow and empty, locked onto mine, and for a moment, I thought I might suffocate from the weight of her gaze. "Why won't you leave me alone?" I whispered, my voice cracking as I backed away from the door. She didn't answer. Instead, she took a slow step forward, and the moment she moved, I felt it, like an invisible force pushing against the car, pulling at my very soul. The air grew cold, and the world around me seemed to distort, as though reality itself was bending, stretching in unnatural ways. With trembling hands, I reached for the ignition again, my breath shaky as I twisted the key. The engine sputtered to life with an almost mocking sound, like it was toying with me. I didn't hesitate this time. I floored the gas pedal, and the car shot forward, the tires skidding as I tore away from her once more. I kept my eyes straight ahead, too terrified to look in the rearview mirror, but I could feel her presence, like a cold, suffocating weight in the air. The road didn't change. The darkness didn't fade. And no matter how far I drove, how fast I went, the sound of footsteps was always there, faint at first, but steadily growing louder, echoing in my ears, until it became a relentless pounding, a pulse in the back of my skull. I had made a mistake. I had tried to escape her, to outrun something that couldn't be outrun. And now, I was trapped. The headlights flickered, then went out. In the darkness, I heard the tapping on the window once more. It was her. And this time, I knew there was no escaping.